So yes, now we're recording the session. Okay, well, thanks for everyone for making time to be here today. Good evening from the UK, good morning or whatever time you are elsewhere. As I say, this event is being recorded. My name is Martin Lipscomb, and this is the first of two events that together celebrate publication of the Routledge Handbook of Philosophy and Nursing. This work came out at the end of August. It's 500 pages plus in length, and it brings together 67 scholars in 47 chapters. And these chapters cover a varied range of philosophic problems and topics and issues that, as the name makes clear, are potentially of relevance to nursing and nurses. Now, I'll shortly introduce today's speakers who are contributors to the book, and they're going to discuss just a few of the ways in which we might think about philosophy and nursing as it is now. And then later this month, we have a second event that explores philosophy and nursing as it might become or develop. But first, before speakers speak, a short commentary on the book. My role in the publication was that of editor, and although this role was or became more time-consuming than anticipated, who would have thought? The book was a pleasure to put together. So I'd like to extend sincere thanks to everyone who contributed, as well as Grace at Routledge, who commissioned the work. And I say editing was a pleasure, and I do mean that. Some chapters, a couple at least, arrived, and truth be told, bar a comma out of place or some other triviality, they were good to go. Those chapters proved interesting to read and easy to organise. However, the majority of contributions, well, we, contributors and I, engaged in sometimes quite extended interactions and discussions, and I enjoyed those toings and froings immensely. I learned a lot as the project developed, a lot about subjects I thought I understood, but as it turned out, I didn't. So this was a fun project to steer. I hope everyone who participated is pleased with the end result. I think they should be. Collectively, we managed something quite impressive here. Now, I mentioned the work was commissioned, and that's interesting. Routledge are obviously a commercial enterprise, and their desire to progress this suggests possibly that enough nurses now interested in philosophy and philosophic inquiry to make publication viable, by which I mean profitable, and that's good. Not that Routledge making money is good, nice if they can, but this is an expensive book. It's one that will primarily be purchased by libraries rather than individuals. What I mean is that if the work is profitable, that means there's a readership for this sort of thing, and that's what I'm applauding. Now, of course, other excellent works on philosophy and nursing exist. However, this is, I think, the first time we've had something so substantial, and that could be significant. So what's in the book? Why might you ask your library to obtain a copy? I won't list every chapter and every author. Were I to do that, would be here some time. What I suggest is that if you are curious, you visit the Routledge website, and there under the Contents tab, you can access the full listing. You can see what's being covered. That said, very briefly, to structure the work, chapters are collated into 7 sections, and these are titled Philosophy and Nursing, socio-cultural and political concerns, about care, questions for nursing, scholarship, research, technology. So philosophy and nursing are explored in different ways. And this difference reappears elsewhere. Thus, in recruiting contributors, I sought out people with diverse perspectives. So while, as you would expect, most of the contributors are nursing, it would have been very strange were that not the case. I also invited scholars who were not nurses to participate, and we therefore have contributions from scholars who write about nursing and healthcare, but are not themselves nurses. And we have contributions from non-nursing scholars whose work is about subjects of interest to nursing, even if that work doesn't usually target nursing specifically. And I did this to avoid the danger of parochialism, the danger of being too inward-looking. I also sought out contributions from people and places that fall outside of Europe and America, people and places that are sometimes not given due attention. Now, unfortunately, just before the work was scheduled for submission, we lost to workload pressures a couple of contributions from Africa and South American scholars, and that's a great shame. However, again, I attempted to facilitate diversity and the inclusion of varied perspectives, even if come the day this proved trickier than anticipated. And a final comment. Organising the chapters into 7 sections, I mentioned those a second ago, wasn't easy. It's probably the thing I'm least satisfied with. By and large, the organisation makes sense. However, there is something peculiar about nurse writing, or peculiar is the wrong word. Nonetheless, I'd suggest our writing tends to cover or traverse more subjects than perhaps writing found in other disciplines that manage a tighter focus. And so a great many chapters could easily have been placed differently than how they were. Now, this isn't in itself a problem or a weakness. Indeed, if or insofar as engaging a variety of subjects reflects attempts to bridge the space between abstract thought and real-world practice, well, this probably evidences a strength in nurse philosophic writing. At the same time, the need to engage practice can make our writing difficult to categorize. It certainly makes it difficult to neatly parcel out when putting a book together. But as I say, that might be considered a strength rather than a weakness. Anyway, I commend the book to you. I hope you consider asking your libraries to obtain a copy. Unsurprisingly, the book reveals the interests of those writing today, and as time marches on, those interests will evolve and change. Nevertheless, this is a work that might be used by educators and students as well as scholars, and who knows, clinicians might also find some of what's discussed of interest. Okay, that's the plug for the book, and so to today's main event. I will introduce speakers as we proceed, and once speakers have spoken, we'll take questions. So questions after everyone has spoken. Therefore, please, if you have a question, if a question occurs to you, scribble it down, and when I ask who has a question, you can either raise an electronic hand and I'll unmute you so that you can talk, assuming I can remember how to do that, or you can submit a question via the chat function. Now, links to the speakers' webpage biographies are included on the flyer for this event, and I won't therefore list everyone's responsibilities and achievements. All of today's speakers are experts in their respective fields, and were I to name their achievements, we'd never get started. Okay, without further ado, to commence proceedings, Professor Mark Risjord of Emory College talks to philosophic thinking about, in and for nursing. He asks, what forms does this thinking take, and does philosophic thinking help or contribute to practice? Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this really interesting book that you just described, and this kickoff symposium. I'm going to respond actually a little bit different from my abstract, but only slightly askew. I want to begin by responding, or take my entire time to respond to Martin's recent essay, Can Philosophy Benefit Nurses and/or Nursing? It's available. Yeah, he did. Martin had no idea I was going to do this. It's available on online preprint from Nursing Philosophy. It's it's only been on the web for a couple of weeks. So if there's any place we are now, this is where we are now. Also, it's the best essay I've read in a long time. It really challenged me. It woke me from my dogmatic slumber in certain ways. And I've got a lot to say. And in the article, Martin himself raises a lot of questions and is clearly of 2 or 3 or 4 minds about many of these questions. So I'm not going to really be disagreeing with him, though I might be disagreeing with some of his minds. I'll let him, he can tell us what that's about. The question I want to zero in on, at least partly, I'm not going to be able to do justice to it, is to what extent does a nurse, or anybody else for that matter, who invokes a philosopher, a philosophical doctrine, need to express or embody some kind of substantive link between what they say and the philosopher's writing? So one of the things that Martin's worried about is, what does substantive mean here? And I think that's a very important worry. I'll take as my big thought piece a quotation that Martin puts in there from Alistair MacIntyre. And here's the quote: "The warring partisans on the great issues that engage our culture and politics presuppose, even when they do not recognize it, the truth of some philosophical theses and the falsity of others. If we are to evaluate these claims, we'd better know something about philosophy." Now, this is I wasn't familiar with this quote before I saw it in Martin's paper, but it's the kind of thing I've heard said gazillion times in my career. I probably, when I was young, I probably said it as well. But I think it's problematic, and I think it sets some barriers to nurse philosophizing, and I want to talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to worry this notion of presupposition for a minute. So he says, the warring partisans presuppose, even when they do not recognize it, the truth of some philosophical theses. So I wrote a little bit about this in one of Martin's, the earlier science, the education and values volume, in replying to John Paley. Now, he's using the word presupposition here. I don't mean to legislate the language, but there's two senses. One is what I would call an assumption, something that can and should be made explicit. And I'm criticizable for not making it explicit, or at least liable for defending it if it's pointed out to me. So here's an argument. I say, the wine bottle is empty, therefore we should open another one. Now, it'd be entirely fair for you to say, well, hey, Mark, we've all had plenty. You're assuming we should drink some more wine, or that people want some more wine. That seems entirely fair to me. And it's incumbent on me in that situation to either defend the proposition or reject or take back the argument, right? But there's a different sense of presupposition, which is the one common in linguistics, that I'm also presupposing in some sense that wine exists, that wine is the kind of thing that fits in bottles, that bottles are the kinds of things that have to be open, and so on and so on and so on. This is what Searle called the background, and Heidegger explored it. Right? There's all these presuppositions that our language, that have to be true if our language is even going to make sense, but there are indefinitely many of them, and it makes no sense I would have to somehow, defend all of them if I'm going to, even say one sentence. So when we're engaging in the great issues, as McIntyre says, great issues and small issues as well, we're often doing what I'm going to count as philosophy, and I've got a very broad conception of what that is. We're saying and thinking things that have some conceptual consequences, and these consequences and these conceptual relationships are puzzling, and we think about them. We take them up as objects of thought. That's all I mean, right? So consider, as an example, a question about structural racism, something that's on a lot of our minds. Suppose I'm in an institution, as in fact I am, where a high level of and a particular kind of education is a condition for employment, but that condition ends up strongly favoring whites over blacks. Now, I participate in this institution. Am I responsible for the perpetuation of the kind of structural racism? Am I a racist for doing this? I think this is a genuine question, and a question that takes hard thought. It's a philosophical question. Now, in asking and raising this question and engaging in this great question of our time, am I making assumptions? Yes, probably, but there are going to be things like, I guess the assumptions I'm making when I ask that kind of question is that people are responsible for their actions, and that responsibility can't be entirely dislodged by an I'm following orders kind of excuse, and a few others. But I'm presuming or assuming the truth or falsity of what some philosophers have said. That I think is extremely problematic. First off, which philosopher? There's a bazillion who have written about this, and they have all different opinions. So if I'm criticizable because I haven't engaged the work of a philosopher, it seems like you're just tagging me because I'm not talking about your favorite philosopher. So it seems like the idea that somehow we presuppose or assume the truth of philosophical theses, if that means something said by philosophers such that we have to attend and know some philosophy to evaluate our own claims, that just seems wrong. It seems like we can engage in that argument without then arguing about all of the many people who have also argued about this. But at the same time, having said that, it's clear that there's no doubt in my mind that reading what those others have said will greatly enrich my own thinking, right? So I think that's a very different relationship to the philosophers. So I don't have to presume the truth of what they said or assume it, what have you. But certainly thinking through these things because someone else has thought them through and thinking it through with them, certainly a way of enriching my thinking. It might be helpful here, I think, to distinguish between two kinds of engagement with philosophy that nursing and nurses might have. One sort of engagement is a kind of direct, explicit engagement of the kind that academics do, right? So when we go to IPONs, when we give a talk, when we publish in the Nursing Philosophy Journal, when we talk to our classes about philosophy, we've got a kind of direct, full-on engagement with philosophers. And here, I think it's quite reasonable to expect responsible scholarship. Again, you're not assuming the truth of what they say, but if I'm going to say something like, if you take a Wittgensteinian point of view on language, then you've got these consequences for nursing practice, I should have at least enough understanding. I should get the Wittgenstein sort of right, or at least close enough right for the kind of purposes that I'm doing. And if someone else has said exactly the same thing, I'm responsible for being aware of that. And if someone else has disagreed with it, I'm responsible for being aware of that. That's just responsible scholarship. But there's lots of things that we do that you might just call, and I think this is not being pejorative at all, just philosophizing, and think this is really important. I'm done. I'm almost done. Okay. So this is where I think we have a responsibility to as educators to get people to read. That doesn't mean they're assuming the truth or somehow have to engage it in a deep sort of way. So there.
Okay. Mark, I was going to say thank you for your contribution, but as you chose to speak to one of my scribblings without warning, I shall say the same thing. Thank you for your contribution. You fiend for that. Okay, our second speaker today is Professor Barbara Pesut of the University of British Columbia. Barbara discusses the essential role of logic, and in particular nursing logic, in preventing illogical and worse tokenistic approaches to equity and inclusion. So Barbara, over to you.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here today. And sorry, I'm struggling with technology here. Okay, today I'm going to provide a brief overview of the message of my chapter. And I've tried to use different analogies and examples so that there'll be some fresh material should you be intrigued and decide to read the chapter. And I'm going to talk about a perfect storm. I'm not sure how many of you saw the movie with that title years back, but it was a compelling account of how a group of fishermen were caught in a collusion of two superstorms that ultimately cost their lives. And for those of you who are interested, it has just come back on Netflix as I was preparing this talk. You know, I see a similar storm developing in our world of nursing ideas. And it's a difficult storm to talk about because there's such an important moral ideal underneath it all. And I would argue probably one of the most important ideals that we can shape our lives around. But my concern is that the path to realizing that ideal has the potential to either strengthen our discipline or cast it adrift. And none of the ideas I share today are particularly new. They've been written about in multiple places across disciplines. But honestly, what feels new is the urgency with which I see these ideas coming together. So let me start with the moral ideal. We live in such a privileged time. We've come to so many realizations about really the very real acts of oppression, both individual and systemic, across axes of difference that have had profound consequences for health and well-being. I know this language won't be popular with some, but I like to think of it almost as a second wave enlightenment, in that we've understood so many things that we took for granted. And I think nursing has really grappled seriously and conscientiously with equality, then social justice, equity, and now really the isms that do so much harm. I think the course we've set for our disciplinary ship has been a good one. So, but then what are the storms I see developing to blow us off course? The first storm is the will to power that inevitably forms around any moral ideal. This ideal has spawned a whole industry that profits off championing the vulnerable. I love the Minefield from the Australian Broadcasting Network, and I was listening to this particularly compelling podcast where they named this will to power claiming the margins. And because that route to power is finite, we have to keep assigning the margins of vulnerability to more and more people. The problem, of course, is that this approach has the potential to simply reify systems of power that have created the problem in the first place. In Canadian academia, and I'm sure it's the same other places, some of the surest ways, and in some cases the only ways to academic success by all markers, is to speak, write, and research on behalf of a marginalized group. But interestingly enough, it's not just those in academia wielding that power. Those within groups that are currently labeled as being on the margins also wield enormous power to control narratives. And that leads to my second point, which is the epistemological storm. We've adopted a radical and unapologetic subjectivity and married that to the powerful moral ideal of justice. Truth is what people feel. And in our commitment to honoring diverse voices, we've removed the right to challenge those voices either through science or reasoning. And that silencing is reinforced by the moral justification of equity and inclusion. I was listening to an equity scholar outside of nursing recently on the integration of diverse perspectives, and they made an appeal to Canadian values, suggesting that they provide the inviolable foundation. And Martin, I know you've written about this as well. I couldn't help but notice the paradox. At the same time we're advocating for diverse voices, we're saying to some extent, as long as you think like us. So rather than the liberal idea of negotiating diverse voices in public spaces, we only allow one voice. And through this radical subjectivity, we smuggle in a value system that sets firm boundaries about what can be said and how, which again results in sort of a bizarre form of tokenism toward our goal. I was really interested to read Roger Watson's chapter on silencing in the book as well. So clearly this is not just a North American or a Canadian phenomenon. So now briefly, I want to turn to the logic of nursing to suggest how we might drop an anchor to ride out these two storms that are so much bigger really than our discipline. And I've drawn upon Sally's work in the logic of inquiry. She suggested that the logic of nursing must be grounded in two things: real world application and congruence with nursing epistemology. I confess, Mark, I was delighted to read your chapter in the book because you unapologetically anchored nursing philosophy within the practical challenges facing the discipline rather than foundational philosophic problems within the nature of nursing itself. And I believe the same approach is important as we try to reconcile the Enlightenment values of reason and science with the second wave Enlightenment values of equity, diversity, and inclusion. We must take practice as our focal point and think carefully about the implications of our discourse and how it can be taken up in practice or not. As faculty, we can foster ideals within the academy without actually ever having to live with the implications of those ideas in practice. And yet every ideal has a price. I think it's essential that when we develop and foster ideals within an environment such as academia, where the enactment of those ideas may actually not cost us anything, we need to look carefully at what those ideas are costing others, particularly those on the front lines of practice. And second, although we've had many debates about nursing epistemology, I think we need to unapologetically hold fast to science and reason as foundational elements. I had an experience recently with a nursing student that really highlighted the epistemological challenges we're facing, at least in Canada. We were in a nursing research class, and a student raised their hand to inform the class that their people had a cure for cancer that had none of the toxicities characteristic of our Western cancer care. You know, in a different time, I could have easily talked about scientific evidence, but not so now. Challenging that claim could have been viewed as both colonial and culturally unsafe. And really, this takes the idea of nursing's epistemological diversity to a whole new level and imbues it with deep moral significance. Whereas we used to grapple with how to prioritize and apply ways of knowing that were all embedded within a Western worldview, we're now grappling with whole epistemological systems embedded within diverse views, some of which see our systems as evidence and rationality as part of colonial oppression. So I think we need earnest conversations about how to negotiate tensions between the Enlightenment values that have brought nursing so far and new epistemological systems characteristic of those with whom we seek to include and partner. So that's just a glimpse of the chapter. I do hope you enjoy reading it. I know I've enjoyed reading the contributions in the book immensely, and I really thank Martin for bringing us all together. And Martin, I send it back to you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Really interesting as always. People might see me waving my hands around occasionally. That's because we've agreed times if presentations. So I'm just reminding people as we approach the end, I'm not engaging in some strange jazz thing. Our third set of speakers are Professors Denise Drevdahl of the University of Washington, Tacoma, and Mary Canales of the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. I hope I've pronounced that reasonably well. Denise and Mary discuss nursing's professionalization project. Denise and Mary, apologies if I've mispronounced, but over to you.
Thank you, Martin. Greetings, everyone. We're really excited to be part of the group and thank Martin for his invitation to participate. We begin the chapter with an overview of nursing's professionalization project, its effort to be worthy of the title profession, with focused attention on professional identity and the various global standards, competencies, domains, etc., that construct the profession's image of who is and can be a nurse. Nursing has made multiple efforts over time to claim the title of professional, yet some argue that semi-professional status persists. Nursing's subordinate, subservient status within the medical hierarchy remains entrenched despite nursing's drive for licensure in the US, registration in the UK, its move to the university with proliferation of graduate degrees, and now the uptake of competency-based training in the US. Through these regulatory and educational mandates, the profession is closed to those not deemed, quote, qualified, often individuals from low income and minority groups. For nursing, like other professional occupations, the goal is power and control over who can enter and remain within the profession. This drive towards professionalism and the associated desired status it brings follows medicine's lead. Medical diagnoses led to nursing diagnoses. Medical competencies led to nursing competencies. Divergence occurred, however, as medicine's move to competencies was propelled by a desire to be accountable to the public versus nursing's desire to prepare, quote, work-ready graduates to meet employers, not the public's needs. We identify many issues related to competencies in the chapter, but for us, a key concern is the expectations competencies enshrine related to professional identity, with statements linking professional identity and virtues. Courage, compassion, altruism, the virtues list is endless. This enshrinement elevates virtues over intellectual skills, thus reinforcing, quote, the good nurse image, a gendered virtues discourse that marks the nurse in a very similar way that nurses were marked by Florence Nightingale, who had no patience for nurses she perceived as impractical, inconsiderate, untrustworthy, or forgetful. Most standards, competencies, guidelines, etc., have professional identity as a goal, further inculcating the gendered virtue discourse, creating a cycle that is difficult to stop. While the public expects nurses to be caring and compassionate, willing to sacrifice themselves, such as what occurred during the pandemic, nurses bemoan the public's devaluing and ignoring their contributions to improving health outcomes. At the same time, nursing education inscribes these same gendered virtues, this same professional identity in educational competencies required to prepare the next generation of nurses, knowing that student nurses want to be caring, compassionate nurses like those they envision or see modeled in the media. These virtues do not, however, prepare them for what they face in today's healthcare system. Denise will explore this cycle further, as well as other unintended consequences of the professionalization project.
Thank you, Mary. I'll spend my brief time reviewing some of the unintended consequences of nursing's pursuit of status through its love affair with competencies, standards, guidelines, and so forth. One consequence is that nursing organizations and accrediting bodies for schools of nursing take on the role of surveillance. Education competencies mandate set expectations that require observation. To quote the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, who are now requiring competencies for US accredited programs, quote, competency-based education is linked to explicitly defined performance expectation based on observable behavior and requires frequent assessment using diverse methodologies and formats, close quote. Thus, nursing students are never not being observed. The extreme example, of course, is the simulation lab, where the nursing instructor, much as the Wizard of Oz, watches and speaks from a hidden space, a disembodied voice from behind the curtain, if you will. Nursing students are trained to follow the commands of the electronic health records, guidelines, standards, checklists, and the like. Dillard Wright and others have written that nursing's workforce working conditions are forms of institutional violence. We posit that practice and educational competencies also contribute to institutional violence as they order, manage, and discipline nursing students and nurses in their work. Another unintended consequence is because competencies can only be determined if they are observable and measurable, anything else does not count as nursing. Sally Thorne has called this devotion to counting activities the, quote, task fraternity. Thus, nursing ends up complying with the rules rather than engaging in critical thinking and learning. One might wonder if this is precisely the kind of nurse employers are looking for, nurses who are so busy honing skills, completing checklists, that they have little time to question authority, demand change, ask hard questions. Instead, nurses who are unhappy with their work situation do what they see as the only alternative. They quit. From our perspective, the perpetual pursuit of professionalization, that's a lot of P's, I have to say, through the focus on procedural knowledge will never adequately capture all that nursing is. To quote Sally again, all that doing makes critical thinking and the intellectual skills integral to nursing work invisible. In the end, the professionalization project almost always focuses on the individual nurse rather than on any faults in the larger system. It homogenizes through its standardization of competencies. It fails to challenge the status quo. The discipline's commitment to portraying the image of the professional nurse as caring, heroic, and sacrificial limits opportunities for critique, and more importantly, prevents the discipline from making waves. I'd like to end with a question, and inspired by our UK colleagues, I turned to John Lennon's Imagine. Can we imagine a world in which nursing is not obsessed with being recognized as a profession, with not being obsessed with obtaining power and prestige, and in the end, just does its work? Can we imagine that? And I wonder if that isn't the core problem, that the discipline fails to imagine any other way of being, and thus repeats and repeats the discourse, the pursuit, and the obsession with professionalization. That's it. Thank you, Martin.
Well, again, thank you very much. And I think for people joining us who weren't, the book is quite challenging in some respects, challenges lots of ways in which people normally think about nursing. So I'm sure you'll have lots of questions come question time. Anyway, lastly, fourth, but by no means least, Professors Louise Racine and Helen Vandenberg, both of the University of Saskatchewan, again, sorry, ask whether anti-intellectualism is fostered in or by nurse education. Louise and Helen, having butchered the name of the place in which you work, over to you.
Thank you very much. Greetings to everyone, and we are very pleased, Helen and I, to be with you, and we are very grateful also for the opportunity to contribute to this discussion and to the book. So we'll provide a bit of background where this paper is coming from. So the paper arose from our discussions that we had together about teaching and technology in our current program. We observed that students request less numerous readings, easier readings, and less demanding assignments. So at the same time, programs focus on nursing technology and education, which may undermine the thinking associated with the doing in nursing. There is less emphasis on reflective intellectual activities, and more time is spent on work readiness, equated to acquiring technical skills. This focus on technical rationality, grounded in neoliberal business culture, explains our use of John Henry Newman's view of a university education as the heuristic means to analyze anti-intellectualism and its fellow, which is educational fundamentalism in nursing. What does that mean? What does anti-intellectual means? Anti-intellectualism is the view that the activities of the mind, such as those supporting knowledge development, like philosophy, ethics, history, research, and the study of abstract theories, are viewed with disdain and contempt. In 1963, Richard Hofstadter published his Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Anti-Intellectualism in American Life. He noted the increased preference for knowledge of practical skills, coupled with a decreased taste for cultivated intellectual development. In 1991, Daniel Rigney explained that anti-intellectualism is the product of religious anti-rationalism, populist anti-elitism, and unreflective instrumentalism. Religious anti-rationalism encourages citizens to favor emotion, morals, and religious doctrine over logic, reason, and facts. Populist anti-elitism supports rejecting institutions associated with social and intellectual elite. And unreflective instrumentalism reflects the anti-historical pro-utilitarian worship of the business culture that encourages valuing knowledge for practical means over all other sorts of knowledge or pursuits, such as universities have come to value job training and sports activity over the pursuit of truth. These three elements reinforce contemporary intellectualism in nursing education, where nursing shortages, work readiness, and technological advances call for educational fundamentalism. Educational fundamentalism arises from corporate business culture that enforces the need to prepare students to the workforce practical realities while emphasizing consumerism, standardization, predictability, control, practicality, and efficiency. Time cannot be lost on understanding the complexities of human health and its relation to history, ethics, moral, and other knowledges. The goal is to increase production of nurses to feed the healthcare system. Anti-intellectualism and educational fundamentalism together push nurse educators to remove history, theory, and philosophy courses and aims students towards what is believed to be a more efficient production of nurses. Anti-intellectual nursing workforce will likely be more obedient, docile, or at the very least, silent population contributing to the well-run system described by Trudy Rudge. This is not what the nurse leaders of the past had intended when they hoped for nursing to join university so that they, too, could benefit from establishing their own activities of science, knowledge development, and evaluation of nursing practices. Now I turn to Helen to discuss about nursing practice and the factors.
Thanks, Louise. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how the complex nature of nursing practice makes anti-intellectualism all that more concerning. So nursing is a human-centered practice discipline that is ontologically and epistemologically different from pure or applied technical disciplines. Nurses must be able to make complex decisions about patients and communities using evidence, ethics, and consideration of individual needs. Nursing requires multiple types of interacting knowledge, and as described by Thorne and Sawatsky, often includes an emphasis on particularizing the general. Or as Mark has also argued, nurses need both an understanding of factual evidence and experiential knowledge to appropriately apply knowledge to individual patients in differing contexts. Nurses must use holistic, ethical, contextual, and relational knowledge to contribute to understanding the complexities of care while respecting people's unique experiences of health, illness, dying, and healing. Anti-intellectualism and educational fundamentalism, with their nihilistic views of philosophy and theoretical knowledge, can jeopardize the survival of nursing in modern universities. So next I want to talk a little bit about the factors supporting anti-intellectualism in nursing. There are several social, historical, and ideological influences to consider. First, the sexism of the past, that when professional nursing emerged, it occurred during a time which devalued education for women. When nursing education was introduced, it resembled more of a socialization process, fostering obedience, subservience, and some application of medical science. As nursing further professionalized, leaders emphasized the ideals of scientific management, which often meant more of a focus on utilizing the science of other disciplines, and the ideals of efficiency, rather than developing its own knowledge base. The association between nursing and menial women's labor meant that the public knew little of the difference between nursing and housekeeping, thus fostering a long-standing assumption that nurses required little education. This has often led to the mass production of less highly educated nurses, which continues as a constant assault on the quality and status of nursing. Moreover, from nursing's earliest history, there's been a division in the goals of the rank and file and the elite. As Catherine McPherson argues, while the elite sought professionalization and improved education, the rank and file have pursued improved pay and working conditions. The differing goals in nursing often fragment nursing's leadership with varying priorities. The disappearance of nursing history from nursing education in the last 70 years undermines the pursuit of quality nursing education, because many of today's educators and students are simply unaware of what has been gained or lost, and thus it makes it easier to distract them with student as consumer narratives focused on empowerment, edutainment, and practice readiness. Second, the influence of neoliberalism with its worship of technocratic and consumerist ideologies, privileging cost efficiency, work readiness, and standardized exams with minimal involvement in the serious work of reflecting on the complexities of practice. And finally, the McDonaldization and corporatization of the university, which has meant the application of fast food principles to university education with its myopic focus on maximizing profits at the expense of ensuring that students are educated. Teaching the art of nursing requires a broader education with exposure to the humanities and the liberal arts, where nursing students learn to develop the abilities required to respond compassionately to the suffering of others. So to conclude, I think our chapter explores the social, historical, and ideological structures contributing to anti-intellectualism in nursing education. And we hope that this chapter will encourage further discussion about educational fundamentalism and related attempts to reduce the activities that support knowledge development in nursing.
Louise and Helen, again, thank you very much. As ever, really interesting. Okay, I hope we've got lots of questions. I'm going to ask Paul Snelling to help me just in case I miss things, because it's easy to miss things. Everyone, please, do you have any questions for our speakers? And if you do, either use the button at the bottom of the screen that allows you to raise an electronic hand and I'll unmute you, or if you pop a question into the chat box, then I'll try and spot that and read it out. So 4 really interesting presentations. Please, who has questions for our speakers, our panelists? Sally, let me unmute you. This is the scary bit. Will I be able to do this thing? Okay, I'm going to make you a presenter, and then I think it works that way. So, okay, you should be able to now unmute yourself and speak, Sally.
Okay, thank you very much. Fascinating. Many ideas there to grapple with. I hope that on reflection I find myself able to kind of digest everything that you've said, but I'm really struck by this idea of the professionalization project. And I just wondered, suppose we did imagine rejecting the rules of that professionalization game project and just focused on doing the job, what might the implications and consequences be for both for the profession and for the public's response?
Louise, Helen, do you want to respond?
I think she's referring to me and Mary Martin. Yeah, am I right, Sally?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I hate really hard questions. It is so I guess that is one of the thing about doing critiques, right? Is that, and then what? How would you come out and imagine this? I think one of the maybe even one of the easier things is we particularly focus on AACN and their competencies, but my guess is that these sorts of guidelines are similar across many countries in terms of there's always seems to be this essence about what a profession should be and what the professional nurse should look like. And I'll let Mary jump in here, but what we see when we look at those is that the expectations are beyond unrealistic for the nurse. She should be honest and forthright and be able have moral courage and we just struggle with the expectations that we as educators put on brand new nurses that full functioning faculty can't even manage to find the wherewithal to do. And the fact that, you know, we started with Nightingale worrying about making this recognized, right, by other sort of the other professions, that seems to have not in 100+ years not to have diminished in any way at all. But how do we I would at least say softening some of those guidelines would be kind of nice, a nice start to it in terms of and asking the profession, asking itself, why are they so focused on doing this? What is the ultimate goal for having this obsession with it? But Mary, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks. I was also struck by the similarities in some of the things in our chapter that we wrote related to the professional project. And when Drs. Racine and Vandenberg were just speaking about anti-intellectualism, and they really are very intricately related, this whole idea of the work-ready graduate and the loss of so many aspects of nursing education because of this movement to produce these work-ready graduates, when in fact, that is really not necessarily what the graduates want to be, right? When you think about the challenges, maybe think way back when we were all new nurses, there was so much to think about and wanting to do to be a good nurse, right? But what does that really mean? I think most of us would consider that as being able to provide care that assists people to become well, right? Or to manage their chronic disease, or some of those other things that are more expected of that new nurse, rather than having the courage to confront the bully that is their clinical instructor, or the courage to confront the negative behavior that their preceptor, who maybe they want to work in this institution, directs against them. I mean, I think it's really difficult as a full professor to confront bullying behavior in my own institution, let alone thinking of a new nurse being able to do that, or a student nurse. But that's the expectation of these competencies. So that idea is that really what we as a profession want, deem appropriate? It raises a lot of questions that we have been struggling with actually for quite a few years doing this work.
Thank you. Patricia Strachan has a question, and also Paul Snelling. So Patricia, do you want to pose your question? Just unmute yourself and then you'll be able to ask.
Here I am. Okay. Thank you so much. If anything, this was very affirming, although I find myself being, kind of saddened by it all, because it just rings so true. And these are things that I've discussed with my graduate students, and we've thought about, and I guess, I'm also thinking, okay, so it just feels like a tidal wave is upon us, and so, how do we get the life ring to continue Barb's maritime analogy. But, and so maybe this is more of an observation, but I think I've often wondered, the students, there are many of our really bright students that actually get this at the undergraduate level or the graduate level, and many nurses as well. They understand what you've articulated today. And sometimes I think they become the most dissatisfied, or and then they leave. And it's made me wonder, I've been at this several decades now, and I see us going back to a very skill-based versus intellectual role. So, and that others are dictating what the role of the nurse is. So the ministries, the governments, somebody in administration, it's not us in the academy. So I guess maybe I'll just throw that back at you. I'm wondering, what is the answer? Continuing to, do we show this to our students? We need faculties that actually can see the worth of discussing this. So I'm just looking for some more thought, I guess, around what to do with all of this. Thank you.
Who would like to respond to Patricia? Okay. Whilst we're thinking about that, Paul, what was your question?
Thanks. I'm struck by the similarities between the excellent presentations, and I want to come back to the title of your paper, Martin, that Mark mentioned, which is this. No, don't hang on. It's Can Philosophy Benefit Nurses and/or Nursing? And apart from what Patricia just said about the brightest our students understand things, much of what was discussed today isn't about benefit to individual, or not benefit, but analysis of how individual nurses can make sense of the world using the things that have been written about in the book, but how these things affect the profession. And some people actually said the profession, but in what many others said, I took that what they mean. So I want to then move from there to probably one of the most famous quotations about philosophy ever, from Marx. This is Philosophy 101. The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. And so my question is to the speakers, those particularly who use their analysis to talk about the profession of nursing rather than individual practice. What can we do? Each of your presentations could be interpreted as slightly worrying. What can be done about it? That's my question to all of them.
I'll take a shot at it and go first in terms of, and Mary and I are working on this. So when Martin put out this call, he said, you could talk about what's in your chapter or how your thinking has changed. And of course, as Mary and I have lived with this now for, thank you, Martin, for over a year and a half or so, right? We're working on some extension and working on some deeper analysis of AACN's hundreds of competencies. For those of you who are in the US, you know what I'm talking about. And we hope to publish a paper that actually takes on this. There is a domain within the AACN competencies called professionalism. And so we hope to have that published. We know that the journal run by AACN probably won't accept it, but we're hoping for a competing journal. And I think that I guess at some level as an academic, what we hope for is that we at least start a conversation with some folks that go, one shouldn't just take this all in and just accept it, which I think my fellow faculty often do. And I often talk about lemmings to the sea, and I would like the lemmings to stop doing that and to stop and do some of that intellectual thinking that Louise and the others were talking about.
Mark, do you have a response to Paul at all?
Yes, thank you. I was just physically raising my hand and wondering how to electronically. Yeah, I mean, this is something I want to develop and only gestured at the end. But I think this is a professional obligation, and I think it's an individual value or virtue, and that is these values of critical thinking are enhanced by philosophical work, and so there's good reason to have students read. I've always thought that there need to be more just humanistic education in nursing, and part of that education is challenging your ideas. So as an educator, my goal is, and maybe this is just because I'm getting old and tired, but I no longer have, as a humanistic educator, the goal of having the students learn particular things. I just want to blow their minds. At some point, I want them to say, holy, I don't know what to think about that. And that's the experience that I think generalizes in really productive ways for individuals. And I think it's the kind of thing that's missing from nursing education, and is one way of articulating some of these very interesting and complex concerns. So what does it mean to blow their minds? That's the bit that I need to articulate some, but I think there is value in thinking along with philosophers and nurse theorists for that matter. And I'm thinking with in the sense of thinking with it critically, not just, oh, they said this and they said that, and okay, I agree, but they said this and somebody else said, no, that's wrong. And so they had to adjust their thinking in certain ways. And now what do I think about that? So this is the sense in which I think, McIntyre in that quote really is pointing to something valuable, but it's being pointed at in an inappropriate kind of way. I don't know if that really scratches the itch there, but it's something to say.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. We're moving towards 6:30, and I know that people in America, Canada might have to go on and do some work at some stage. So before we get to 6:30, Sally and Patricia, I know you've got your hands up, so I'll come back in a second. But for those who might need to rush off after the hour, I'd just like to formally conclude by thanking everyone who made time to attend today. Thank you. And I'd obviously like to thank and applaud Mark, Barbara, Denise, Mary, Louise and Helen for contributing. Really interesting. Thank you very much. I hope everyone will remember to consider, if diaries permit, attending our second event launch on the 30th of November. And lastly, perhaps you'd think about checking out the book, and possibly, if you think it's of interest, asking your institutions to obtain a copy. So thank you for everyone who came along today. I know lots of people will now need to dash off after the hour. Sally, you popped your hand back up again, and Patricia, you also popped your hand up again. So I know people will have to leave, but that's fine. Sally, what was it you wanted to say?
Thank you, just so stimulating. I wondered really a question for Helen, if at all possible. I'm just wondering about the prejudices and barriers that were spoken about that contribute to anti-intellectualism. And I wondered if there was such a thing as a social prejudice against nursing itself that means that it and we feed the narrative of anti-intellectualism, something beyond us as gender, something beyond gendered workforce, but in of itself that nursing doesn't cut the sway, as it were.
That's a very good point that I haven't thought about before. So it's maybe something to think about. I did want to also maybe respond a little bit to your idea of can we just do the job? I guess my hope is that we I think we have to pay attention to both, because at the moment I hear a lot of nurses in practice who feel they can't do their job. So I wonder how it all fits together, because if they're telling me they can't do their job and they're looking to me thinking I have some special powers and I don't, maybe there's a problem, and maybe we need to work together, towards making sure they can do their jobs.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. Maybe that's not out there yet. Perhaps we should talk about it more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't know if we've got any more questions, but do any of the presenters want to say a final word about anything? Mark.
Just thank you for the opportunity. I've got no neat summaries. This has been a super interesting session, and please be part of it. Thank you, Martin, for organizing this. Good stuff.
Okay, Barbara.
No, I was just going to echo my thanks. This has been a really stimulating book and so useful.
Okay, cool. Denise, Helen, Louise, Mary.
I'll just follow up with.
Yep.
Can I just follow up with Helen's comment about they can't do their work? And I agree that it's, frankly, I'm glad I'm not working back in a hospital again. I'm pretty sure I can't do that work. But maybe that's what's gone off the rails, and the expectations are so huge about everything, about being heroic and courageous and sacrificial, that we have lost that what's wrong. And this is one of my big problems with nursing writ large is all the little webinars on making nurses resilient, the individual, without thinking about what's wrong with the systems in which nurses find themselves working. And so that is where we need to focus from my perspective. Thanks, Martin.
Cool.
And I would just add to that with the focus on the systems, that then would assume that nursing is willing to push back against employers and health systems, which frankly has not been the case. And so, especially with professional organizations, they often are quite quiet when there's major issues to address or major factors to consider to improve the nursing conditions. And so I think again, it goes back to the power and control. Is that more important as a professional in the professional organizations than really looking at what steps to take to improve conditions? And in the US, the recent efforts have been led by unions, organized labor, which nursing has not really been supportive of, at least in the US. So I think there's that aspect too of the professional organizations and their role in maintaining these structures.
I would like to speak about, thank you very much for providing us with an avenue to express those ideas. I think there needs to be more work on anti-intellectualism in nursing. There's a couple of authors looking at that, but basically we need to be more to share more, to create more awareness. However, I will repeat what Rolf says, that there is no simple answer to that problem, and there's no simple answer and strategy to fight at the level of market and corporate university culture, and also a system the healthcare system culture as well. So what we suggest is that, and in that chapter we could not really expand on the strategies how to counteract intellectualism in nursing, but we published, Helen and I, a paper in Nursing Philosophy where we expand those ideas of where can we start. First, it's at the disciplinary level, at the pedagogical level, but it will be at the social level as well, at the social political level and university level. So there's many fronts from which anti-intellectualism needs to be addressed. And sorry for using the word front, but I don't find anything. I'm French, so I don't find anything more specific, but there's no easy answer, but if we don't start thinking and acting, I think it can really jeopardize nursing for the future. And I just assisted to a 3D VR reality projection use of, and I was struck by the compartmentalization, you know, the mechanistic view of nursing that has been suggested by using 3-dimension virtual reality. So I think we need to, because in some sense, intellectualism could be bolstered by using, you know, online. I'm not against technology, but we have to be always careful with that, especially with intellectualism and educational fundamentalism. So thank you very much for that opportunity today to share with and to learn from other scholars. I will read the book. Sorry, I haven't done my homework. I will read the book. Thanks.
I'm shocked. Okay.
You're
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone who attended today, and again thank you to those who agreed to contribute. Really thank you very much. On the 30th of November, our event will have Pam Grace, Michael Trainer, Sally Thorne, John Paley and Paul Snelling. So I hope people will be able to join that one, and again thank you very much, and I shall now end the recording. So I'm never too sure who actually wants to listen to recordings of things, but